a lot of what I did, I just went to places because I wanted to be there. I had sometimes assignments, sometimes I was working for a record company, but a lot of times, certainly all the clubs, I just went because I wanted to be there. And they told me they were in Edinburgh, and I actually flew up there, and like I say, one thing leads to another in my life. There was a lot of good coincidences. When I checked into the hotel, Paul and Mick from The Clash were just coming down to ask for something at the desk, and we walked back to the elevator together, and Mick kind of looked me over, remembered me from Club Louise, and he said, "Oh, you're that guy from New York, aren't you, photographer?" And I said, "Yeah." And Paul said, "Well, you better look out for us because we're cunts." And I said, "Yeah, well, you look it." and that's how that friendship started. So I saw him that night, and I actually went on to the next day and saw him in Glasgow, and then I got a ride with the guy who was the promoter of the tour, and that night I think I ended up staying up all night and talking to Joe Strummer after the show, and I came back in the summer and saw another couple of shows of theirs, and then when they came to New York, I was one of the few people they knew, and I had a big old 54 Buick by then, a big rock and roll car, and we used to drive around town and go to all the clubs together. And pretty much that's how all of these pictures developed. I was either on assignment for a magazine or just hanging out with friends or both. And it's been fun, and it still is fun. I have a good relationship with Green Day. I take pictures of them nowadays. They're really fun. A guy named Ryan Adams. And Courtney Love. I think we have a picture somewhere around here, I hope. And so I'm really glad to be out here. And instead of me just rambling on, that kind of explains the kind of road I've taken. But I wanted to ask, what you guys want to know about. So if anybody has any questions, yeah?
Yeah, who are some of the other contemporaries that you admire? Annie Leibovitz or Herb Green? Anybody besides New York that you...
Well, Annie I met early on, actually, when Rolling Stone first started. We were friends in the early 70s. And I really like her journalism work. Later, she kind of went more into the advertising. I'm more of a journalist. I kind of capture... she does it once in a while, and it's really interesting, and I like that. The people I admire actually are Man Ray and Cartier-Bresson and people like that. In the 50s, I was really attracted to photography as an art, and I like that kind of feeling. Ouija, for always being there at the right moment. I like pictures that create a feeling, and not just recording an event, but actually pass on some of the passion of the moment. So I like those kind of photographers. As far as contemporaries, Jim Marshall, a guy named David Godless, people like that.
You've got like a wall of fame almost of Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, which is fabulous, but there's like one in the middle right there on the right that's got Robert Plant and then Jimmy Page with that look on his face, and you captured it in another picture 2 years apart, like almost the same look on Jimmy Page's face. So anything you can talk about Zeppelin is wonderful.
Yeah, when was the first time you hooked up with them?
Actually, the day I took the plane picture. I really was never that involved with Led Zeppelin. When I first saw them, actually, while I was waiting on the sidewalk and the band came out, I was there with Lisa Robinson. We were taking some pictures of a day flying with Led Zeppelin to Cincinnati, playing a stadium and coming back. I hadn't really heard their records yet. And they were already a big band playing in the stadium. It's probably 73, I think. And I had heard of them vaguely. I'd seen a big blimp that they had in record company offices promoting them. But I'm not really a heavy metal kind of fan. I like more of a Chuck Berry, 3-minute song with a beat and something that gets to the point. And when I was waiting for them, the manager, Peter Grant, and his sidekick came storming out, and they kind of knocked over a few fans who were standing there waiting for autographs as if they were bowling pins, as if they weren't there. And it kind of really frightened me. And they were really rough kind of people, the managers. And the band was basically pretty mellow at the time, under the influence of all the things that were around in the 70s. And I wasn't a girl, so they really had nothing to say to me, But when we got in the cars and we went out to the airport, and as we arrived at the plane, as we were going in, I think it was Robert who suggested, take a picture of me with my plane. And we walked over, and I took about 10 shots, and this one came out pretty well. To a lot of people, it sort of sums up the excess of the 70s. And it was a really nice plane. It actually wasn't there. They didn't own the plane. You rent the plane. It was called the Starship, and I was lucky enough to be on it with Elton John, Alice Cooper, a couple of different people.
You get on their website, that photos being publicized very heavily.
Yeah, it's on a blanket, but also you
It's a
take
nice
these
blanket.
pictures again 2 years apart that are like almost exactly. I mean, it's amazing that you captured Jimmy Page's face. They're like 2 years apart, 75, I think, and 77. One in the middle and one on the bottom that you captured it like perfectly.
He
Like,
still looks
Well,
that way, doesn't he?
yeah, well,
He
takes that
You were over there looking
Yeah.
at it. It was like you were like unbelievable. That you got that look of intense love of rock.
well, I
and roll on
usually
your face.
feel the beat and feel the music, and I try and get the right moment when that really expresses the feeling.
Hey, Bob, I have a
So,
question. What about the infamous Kiss Jesse Hill portrait?
Oh, yeah, they were fun. What that came about because I did a lot of work with Cream magazine, and they were a really fun magazine, and they would do interesting layouts, and they decided to do a kind of photo cartoon where Kiss was going to save the world with rock and roll. And it starts out with Kiss being mild-mannered in their secret identity.
Really a comic strip?
Well, one of those photo comic strips. And they start out in the subway going to work and reading the newspaper, and they hear that there's going to be a John Denver concert. And they decide that they have to save the world from John Denver. And so we went to the subway and we took the first set of pictures of them reading the newspaper and standing on the platform. And then they were running into a phone booth, actually pulling their suits off. And then we went to another subway and they're coming running out in their Kiss costumes. And they put up a whole bunch of posters for a John Denver concert. And when everybody arrives, instead of John Denver, Kiss comes out on the stage and saves the world. And they get medals pinned on them, and they have a whole room full of girls, and it's a better world. But while we were doing that, when we came out of the subway, at one point I just sort of suggested, let's take a picture. You guys look so great in the suits. And they liked the picture so much that they used it for their album cover called Dress to Kill, which had rather than printing the name Kiss, it was just embossed in the black outline all around it, and it won a lot of awards. You know.
Got this Dylan photo from 1965.
Ah, yes.
Is that one of your earliest ones?
Yes. I got my very first photo pass in '64 when I went to the Newport Folk Festival. A friend of my mother's ran a public relations agency, and he wrote a letter that I was representing them. I was about 18. And I just went up to the box office and insisted on a pass until I got one, which was what I had to do for most of my life. And this was the next year in '65. I was back. I got another photo pass, and that was a really intense moment when he first came out at the Newport Folk Festival with an electric guitar and a band.
Throwing stuff at it.
And they weren't exactly throwing things, but they were booing and cheering at the same time. It was really intense how half the audience really loved it and half the audience really hated it and didn't want anything to change. And to me, it was kind of the moment that rock and roll became the folk music of America.
Yeah. Did you actually meet him?
Well, once under odd circumstances, we never really got along. I never really. It's the one person. He's actually my biggest idol, and the one person I never really connected with in all the years.
Backed him up. You know, Robbie Roberts and the band. Backed him up.
I didn't. I did an album cover for the band at what was it, Powder Ridge? I think was a festival, and vaguely got to meet them, but we didn't really. They were up in Woodstock most of the time, and I never was. I was more of a city boy, so.
What do you think of the state of music today? All the pictures you've taken are of rock icons. I don't see any rock icons today.
Well, when I took these pictures, a lot of these people weren't icons. You know, and I wonder that too, like what is going to grow out of this world? Because people often say to me, wow, I wish I was born in the 70s, or I wish I went to Max's. But when we were at Max's, it was like any other bar. We're sitting around going, well, what are you doing this weekend? Well, I don't know. What are you doing this weekend, you know? Well, maybe Debbie's playing down at CB's. Oh, yeah, I'll see you there, you know. And then down at CB's, the same thing. Well, oh, I hear that, you know, Richard Hell's up at Max's. Let's go up there, you know. And nobody knew that these people were going to mean anything. I mean, the New York Dolls never expected to be a worldwide household name, for sure. You know, and at the time, there was no airplay for any of these people. It was very underground. There was no MTV. It was a different world. So nowadays, with the advent of it, it's obviously going to be different. But I don't know what it's going to be. But I know that 20 years from now, all those 20-year-olds are going to have something that was their world. That, you know, I don't know if it's MySpace, but it's going to be something that's real for them. I hope. I mean, I assume, every generation has that, but you don't know at the time. Sitting around CBGBs, we didn't know. I mean, it was bizarre to even suggest that anybody would ever hear of CBGBs. I mean, there was a time when Clive Davis, who was at that point a pretty powerful guy, head of CBS Records, said to Lisa Robinson, you better not talk about the New York Dolls above 14th Street if you want to stay in the music business. Like, nobody wants to hear about that downtown trash, stupid scene, transvestite and drugs and so on, although they weren't transvestites. They were those macho guys. Like I said, I was hanging out with the Hells Angels when I met the New York Dolls. They were much more macho. They were serious. They just were dressing up to be really beautiful, to get more girls. And their girls were a lot better than the Hells Angels, too.
Did you ever try playing an instrument or singing? Or you always
I had a little history of that, yeah. When I was in high school, the first thing my parents had me learn to play the trumpet. And I used to do bugle in the Boy Scouts and things like that. But it was pushing back my teeth. I was too young for it. So they had me switch to the drums, which didn't work at all. And actually the trumpet, they wanted me to play notes. I was playing John Philip Sousa in the band. And I wanted to play Miles Davis. And they kept telling me I had to play these scales first. And it's probably true, but I wanted to play Miles Davis. I just wanted to go free on it. And then they had me play the drums for a while, but that was pathetic. And then in the folk music, I played a bit of folk guitar. And I learned how to play, strumming along, and went to Newport for the hootenannies and stuff. We'd sit around, and I played the Phil Oakes songs and Tom Paxton and Bob Dylan. And then all my friends, the Beatles, came out, and everybody started playing notes. And I started taking pictures instead. But then a funny thing happened, because in the 70s, I was sitting around, I went to see the Clash, and they were playing some shows around Christmas. I think it was 79 or so, or maybe 1980, probably 79. Anyway, I was over there in 79. And I went to Paul Simonon's house to get a ride, and there was a bugle on his table, and he was in the bathroom getting dressed, and I picked up the bugle like I always would and just played a few, bugle calls. And he came running out and said, "You can play the bugle?" And I said, "Yeah, can't everybody?" I mean, it's pretty simple, reveille, taps, that kind of stuff. Well, they were looking for a bugle player, and they wanted somebody to play a call to arms and charge to open the show. And so I was actually in the Clash for a couple of shows. I played at Acklam Hall in London, and then a big show that was a benefit for Cambodia, a United Nations show. And then when they came in New York and played at Bonds, I played for 2 weeks on Broadway. So, but I don't play too much anymore.
You met Lennon's after the split of Apple. Did you know George Harrison at all?
I actually met all the Beatles individually after the Beatles. Although George Harrison, it was a funny situation. You have to understand, in the 70s, everybody's on different levels, yes. And there was a lot of chemistry going on. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. I met Paul McCartney a couple of times. I actually met him at John and Yoko's house once when he came to visit. I was there at Christmas, and it was just John and Yoko and myself sitting in the bedroom, and somebody knocked on the door of the apartment. And that doesn't happen in the Dakota building, because you have to get buzzed in through a series of doors, and they were very nervous. It was while the immigration case was still going on, and they didn't know who could possibly be knocking at their door. And he sent me out to open the door, and I opened the inner door, and I heard somebody singing Christmas carols. And so I called back, I said, "It's okay, don't worry, it's just some people in the building singing Christmas carols." And I opened the outer door, and it was Paul and Linda. And they're saying, "We wish you a Merry Christmas." And I said, "I think you want to see the guys in the," huh?
Same year as the concert for Bangladesh?
No, it was a couple of years after. I think it was around 76, probably. Somewhere. It's in my book. I hope I got the date right in there. I think so. I did pretty good research.
George Harrison's attorney when Apple split.
I
could tell you stories about George and Yoko then.
Well, I was there when they signed the contract. It was years of subpoenas back and forth. I saw Yoko and John get served a couple of times. But one night John called me up around 4 in the morning, asked if I was busy. I said, "Well, no, not now." It was 4 in the morning. He said, "Well, come up to the Plaza Hotel. We're finally signing the deal." And Alan Klein went out and he bought a big bread and put it on the table, and they put the papers on top that they were splitting the bread. And it was an 80-page contract. And John told me that the original contract was like 3 paragraphs on one paper. And to break it up took these 80 pages, and they had a whole room full of lawyers. It must have been 25 in the room or something at least. I think there's a picture of them in the book. Favorite one? These are all my favorites in a sense. If I had to pick one out, it's probably John Lennon at the Statue of Liberty, just because I think it has a lot of meaning for a lot of people that John Lennon really represented personal freedom in the same way that the Statue of Liberty, encourages people to, live out their dreams.